Thinking about self-publishing and don't know where to start? Join the Spa Girls each week for 30 or 40 minutes of honest advice, tips and resources. I'm Trudy J and I am here with Cheryl Phipps.
Hi there.
Wendy Valor.
Hello.
And Shah Barrett.
Hi.
And this week we have another amazing guest. We've got Holly Mortimer. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome, Holly.
Hi. Now, Cheryl's going to give you a quick bio about Holly, and the actual topic we're going to talk about today is email marketing or newsletter marketing. So I can't wait to get into that topic. But first, Cheryl.
Okay, welcome everybody. So, Holly Mortimer is a self-published author of contemporary romance and sexy woman's fiction. She's turned her passion for travel into a romance brand that travels the world, discovering romance inside small tourism towns in the UK, Europe, and North America. Based in the theatre city of Stratford, Ontario, she has self-published 8 novels and is currently working on her 9th, a new sexy woman's fiction trilogy, following 3 40-something women as they explore their own second chances at finding true love and personal growth. She graduated from college with a diploma in music business and spent many years working in Nashville, Tennessee, and then Toronto, promoting up-and-coming singer-songwriters. It was on the road with these artists where she found her true love, writing. Combining her love of writing and marketing, she is the owner of the consulting firm The Social Vert and runs a successful membership base and mastermind for romance writers, The Social Vert Society. Her mission is to teach romance writers how to use digital marketing and email list building to increase their sales and cultivate a loyal fan base. And so that is Holly, and we're going to talk to her email marketing with some next level tips. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited.
That's a great bio.
It is a great bio.
With a bit of Nashville, Tennessee tucked in there. And why don't you write rockstar romances? Let's just start there, because that's a really obvious question.
Yeah. I get asked that a lot. And I think because I spent a lot of time diving deep into that world, and I have a lot of friends that still live inside that world, that I tend to not write about it, because I would just
doesn't seem romantic.
I would be afraid somebody would open a book and go, "Oh,
That's
come
me.
on," you know.
For real?
So I've been really fortunate to meet some really well-known people in that industry, and I have a lot of legal documents behind those things, and it's just too hard for me to not write about that word for word and not have anybody kind of clearly know what I'm talking about. And that was so I love reading rockstar romances, and I find I mean maybe one day, but right now I'm still nervous. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so we've kind of got a little bit of your career, but can you tell us how? So did you just one day pick up the pen? How did you actually get into writing as you were?
Well, I started writing when I was 17. I had a request in an ancient Egyptian history final essay that I had to write, and it was about Cleopatra, and I wrote it as a love story. And my teacher, I'll never forget her, she was just like one of those gypsy-esque, like very different, and you loved taking her class or you didn't. So like she was very romanticizing a lot of things. Anyway, I wrote it and she said, "Have you ever thought about a career in soap opera writing?" And just, this isn't exactly what I was looking for, but it read like a romance book, you know, and I'm like, no, I haven't, you know, and I didn't even think that was a thing, but I love watching soap operas. And I started writing in college, just submitting, and I won a few awards, and the same kind of feedback was coming, but I never thought that it was something that would be a career, although I was in the arts. And when I was on the road with some artists through the record company I worked for, I just started handwriting like love stories inspired by their songwriting and those country songs that are all about love and loss and heartbreak and then I didn't until I started having kids, and I left the road because it was just no place to raise a family, and started to really think about, could this be a career? And with the indie publishing and Kindle and all of that stuff exploded, I'm in. So I can give this a try.
Awesome. Yeah. And how long have you been an author, and when did you first publish, and how long?
Yeah, so first published have been 6 years now, so 2014.
Okay. And are you full-time? What do you?
Well, I'm not full-time, and that's by choice. I love my business that I run. I love it so much, and I have a really hard time pulling away from it. And so I just can't leave it. So yeah, I own my own business full-time, and I write regular part-time. So I write a dedicated 2 to 3 hours a day, 5 days a week in the writing space, and the rest of my day is spent writing newsletters. So kind of writing all the time. Yeah,
with the social
cool.
vert. So that's the socialvert.com if people are looking for where you are. Okay, so well, that's a good segue into the newsletter writing business. So we kind of wanted to focus down on kind of the initial stages of it, just because that's sometimes the hardest part for people to kind of figure out if they've never done a newsletter before, or they're just thinking, they're trying to figure out what the best way to do it is.
Making the choices.
So making the choices. So, well, maybe, okay, I'm going to first start with a general question. How important is to have newsletters? Like, why should we have a newsletter as an author?
Well, completely biased, but I think it's the most important thing that you need. I think that what we've noticed in the last 6 months, especially, is that there is social media has evolved over the past few years, but particularly when you're relying on social media to deliver the majority of your marketing strategy and your projects, that stuff just isn't getting seen, or at the other end, you're not in control as far as what happens with your social media content. I love social media. I love it a lot, but I don't even use Facebook anymore. I rely solely on a sequence to get people from my social media into my newsletter, which is my main driver of business. And I wholeheartedly, deeply am passionate about building a list, because you can control that, and you can put the content in there that you really want to talk about, and you can create conversation from that. There's just got to be some thought behind it, before you dive in. But I think it is one of the most important pieces to a marketing strategy.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, so you talk about building a list. So how do we talk about the platform first, or do we talk about the?
So I think that building a list, the most common question I get from people that are starting out, regardless of, because I work with people who are in I call it traditional business settings, like brick and mortar buildings, selling retail, and authors, and the same questions come across. It doesn't matter who's talking to me, and the biggest one is, I'm brand new, I don't have anything to talk about or sell. And then the other question I got is, I don't even know how to get one person on my list that isn't my family member, and the third thing that often always comes up too is, I'm so boring. Like, what would I even talk about? And then I just get passionate about, like, we're not boring. We're not boring people. We write books. We write great books that are super interesting. Why are we so afraid of writing a newsletter? And why are we so afraid of putting some copy inside that newsletter, as opposed to slapping up a book and a cover and some links and calling it a day? And there's so much psychology behind it that I won't get into it today. But I always encourage them to, like, write down a strategy. Where can anybody find you? Like, is it obviously the most easiest one is at the end of your back matter. So at the end of your book, are you making sure that you're immediately moving them into your list? If you're on social media, are you thinking long-term? Or like, I gate all of my social content with you can come into this Facebook group, but before you do, I'm going to ask you if you want to give me your email address for my newsletter. And only then, if you say yes or no, then you can come in. I don't care what you say. If you say no, it's fine. But I have all of the policies and terms of service right in this little ask. So I get people from there, and you can get people from your website, and you can get people from Pinterest. You just start to write down all of the places that somebody could potentially discover you, and then figure out how you can use that place to move them to your list.
Okay.
So that's my that's my first step always. And often what comes up are things that you weren't even thinking about, like, oh, I have a Pinterest page, but I'm not really doing anything with it. Like, oh, you can set it and forget it over there, right? And it's a major driver to your newsletter list. But part two to that is always, all right, we have all these places where people can find us, but what happens when they get there? Do you have a welcome sequence that automatically delivers them something? And the answer more often than not is no. And my mission this year is to get welcome sequences in the hands of every author that I meet, and that sounds terrifying. A welcome sequence, my God, how do I even write that? And it's really just a series of emails that move a reader deeper into the relationship that they have with you.
Yeah. Okay. So how do we do that? Like so how many emails are you talking about in a welcome sequence? What kind of content?
So it can be as simple as one, which I never stop at one, but I mean, if that's all you have the interest in, like Mailchimp will define an automated welcome sequence as a single email. And I would agree with that, but that email better pack a lot of punch if you're just going to do one and done. I like 3 to 4 emails, and the fourth is a dependent on what happens. I won't get too far into the weeds here, but the first email should remind them of why they're there. So if they came from a book funnel promo, it's like, thanks and welcome, and thanks for clicking through on whatever the promo, like if I can't remember, there's so many different titles. So you just kind of remind them, yeah, you asked to be here, and this is where you came from, and this is my name. I have a picture of me. Some people don't like pictures of themselves. That's fine. I'm here. This is me. And that picture starts that relationship piece so that people buy from people they know, like, and trust. And if they can see your face, they have a tendency to trust you more. And buying the next book is always a trust piece with readers, I find. So it's text-based. There's nothing fancy about my first email, but it does the job of, this is why you're here. Here's the book I promised you. Here's a picture of me. See you next week. Actually 3 days. I never leave it more than 3 days after the first email. And then the next email will deliver them, depends on the sequence I'm working on, but if I've given them a book, I'll remind them that I gave them a book in the next email. I'll ask them for a review of the book, and I'll link it out to my preferred platform. If you're in KU, that's an easy one. For me, I'm wide, so I'll send them typically to Apple, sometimes Kobo. And then I'll give them what could be next. So here's the next book in the series. And I hang out on Instagram. Want to hang out with me there, kind of thing. And then the next email is solely information based. I'm not selling them anything. I'm just building that relationship. And then for me, I'm on Instagram. Here's the kind of things I do. I have screenshots of my grid and the votes that we have and the fun that we have and the things that we talk about. And then the final email is delivering them one final ask for a sale. And I always say, find your best-selling book and put it in there. If you're brand new and you only have one book and it's not in this series, you can skip that email, or you can, if you have a pre-order, put it in there. Something that can sell to them. And then you give the sequence lots of instruction at that point. If they've clicked and opened, they are considered this segment. If they have not clicked and opened anything, then I give them one last email, which is a funny one. I say, quick, choose alpha or beta. What hero do you love to see? And they just click a button, and that's it. And then if they click a button, they get shuttled back into that segment that I call it my warm segment. And if they click nothing, they get put in a re-engagement segment, and I don't email them anything until I'm ready to try to hit them again. Kind of thing.
That's interesting.
And that's a standard sequence that we can make little things here and there happen throughout it, but it's a formula that I use over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's interesting that you still, even though they've just signed up to your list, you're still kind of looking for whether or not they're actually clicking and engaging, because that's I hadn't even thought of that I'm like, they only just joined, surely they're engaged. But that's interesting.
Well, a big problem that we encounter is our freebie seekers, right? And trying to decide how much time and effort to give to converting them. If they're never going to convert, I want the welcome sequence to do all of that finding out. And it can do so much heavy lifting, so that your open rate when you are sending out your regular newsletters, which is what the algorithms are reading, there aren't what they call inactive or whatever you want to call them. They have many names, but people that are never going to buy from you, they're just there to get the freebies. And I'm not deleting them, but I'm just putting them in the group to kind of deal with on a quarterly or a biannually basis. So the welcome sequence can do all of that when you're not even thinking about it, if you just set it up. And I haven't met many email service providers that don't have that feature. So it's very common that you should be able to access it.
Yeah, which is essentially tagging them. Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. Every service provider has their own term for it, which drives me crazy, but essentially it's just a tag, and I have tags all over the place, but basic tags are just, did they open and click? Did they not? And that simple one is a great starting point.
Can you, Shah, we can't hear you, so but can you explain the difference between organic and not organic? So you talked about book funnel there for a minute, and so can you sort of explain the difference between getting organic traffic into your website and the rest of it?
Organic traffic is happening just naturally, like it's not paid for, kind of, and organic traffic is the best kind of, it's the easiest to qualify as they're interested in what it is that you have. And they will come to you, like, for example, that Facebook group gate, that's an organic traffic piece. I've given them an ask, and they've made a decision without me influencing them in any way. They've asked to be there. Yeah, I would like to be there. That's a great idea. I'm coming in, as opposed to paid traffic, which could be a newsletter builder or a Facebook ad, which I do frequently to bump my list up, where that's kind of, all right, I'm going to cast a big net, see what happens. And then again, it's the welcome sequence's job to decide who makes it in, and who gets set aside to have a new strategy applied to them.
Yeah. And so maybe that an organic strategy is where you need to, even more important to have that last alpha beta question to see whether or not they are actually interested. Is that what you'd say?
Yeah, that's my most popular email in my welcome sequence, and it works very well. And I used to have it, and I've experimented with it, and one of my favorite things to do is split testing, as any kind of born and bred marketer loves a good test, and so I've tried it with buttons, and I've tried it with reply, and the reply worked. I think I probably got a 20% reply rate, which isn't always easy to do, but it's such a divisive ask. Do you like alpha heroes or do you like beta? And one funny thing that I love that happened from that is how many people went to the wall for their beta love, and they would reply, and then I'm like, what? I don't like betas, and I like alphas. And it just starts this conversation, and that's this natural or organic or way to like really start to talk to your readers and move them deeper in. And if they're clicking or replying on that last email, then you've got them. Like they become almost like your sales team. And it's so hard to do that on social media. You have your engagers that are usually always the ones that are answering and talking to you, and say out of 1,000 people, there might be 5 people, that you can say, oh, I know who's going to comment on this. And as you grow, you can usually, organically create that, duplicate that number. So maybe it's 20, maybe it's 30. But you never know on a day, like, who's going to be shown that content. But in your welcome sequence, and that everybody's going to be shown that content, and then they're going to actively make a decision whether they're going to open it, whether they're going to ignore it, or whether they're going to delete it. And that alone gives you some seriously solid data on on how you're converting. And that's just a word for when somebody meets you, do they buy from you or do they not? You know, and not necessarily buying your book, but buying your brand.
Yeah.
They're buying.
Yeah.
And so that last email is so good at doing that.
Mm-hmm. So, Holly, I've got a question in terms of that welcome sequence. Have you found an ideal length of time that it runs over, like 1 week, 2 weeks kind of thing? Say you're doing 3 or 4 in the sequence.
Yeah, I try not to have mine run any more than 2 weeks because I am a frequent newsletter sender.
Right.
And I don't send anybody a newsletter who is currently in a sequence. And so on their way into every sequence, I tag them as in a workflow or in a queue or whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And then I know to exclude that group of people with every newsletter that goes out. And then I have an automatic tag that removes that on their way out of the sequence. So what I don't want is a whole lot of people moving through the sequence and they're not getting some important emails from me. So I try to get them in and get them out quickly, but not too quickly, right? So I give them some time to read the first book, you know, that they've had, and to kind of get to know me, follow me on Instagram or buy something else from me. But I try not to leave it for too long so I can start selling to them.
Do you give them the first book in your series? What are you giving them?
I don't. I used to, but I don't do that anymore. It's not my method I think it's a great way to sell books. And sometimes I give them the first book free, and that's why I don't do it all the time. I like to use that as a highly leveraged piece of my marketing content. So you don't always get it free. You only get it free through certain avenues. So I usually use a novella. Right now, I always use a novella that is a companion to my best-selling series.
Okay. That's cool.
And it's like book 1.5 or 2.5, can't remember.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about automations all day long, but I'm going to one thing I want to do is step back so if someone's going, but I don't have a newsletter and I don't know which provider to use, can you talk a little bit about the different providers out there and you know a little bit about all the different ones?
Yeah, sure. I've used many of them. Unfortunately, I started with the same one I think most people start with, that's Mailchimp, and they've done the best job at becoming a brand name that most people who are looking at newsletters know, because they've paid a lot of money to be that first result in most people's search terms. But they are my least favorite newsletter service provider for many, many reasons. And I won't get into them all. I've had many meetings with them, one-on-one meetings, where I've left with kind of a bad taste in my mouth. And I find that Mailchimp 2 years ago in 2018 was purchased by another company and was rebranded and kind of coming out in more of the all-encompassing marketing kind of product. So they wanted to be, even as a matter of fact, at the tech conference I was at, they didn't have email in any of their branding present. So it was all about their marketing and not their email marketing. So they have landing pages and websites and all the things that a lot of the other email service providers have, but they were moving into some new spaces and they wanted that email piece to be left behind. And what they said to me was basically, we're not an email marketing company, we're a marketing company. And so to me, that's where I walked away, along with the fact that they think marketing to unsubscribed people, keeping them in your active database and charging you for them, and encouraging you to create a segment of unsubscribed readers and then actively market to them, which is completely illegal in many parts of the world, if not just unethical in the parts where it's not illegal. Just left a bad taste in my mouth. On top of that, they changed their structure, their pricing structure, and at that time, their automation is free with one email, and if you want more, you have to pay for it. And now, even if you're paying for it, you can only get 3 emails in an automation. If you want more, you have to pay for it. So there's just a pricing structure to me that just doesn't feel great. And they're complicated. I find their platform really unuser friendly. So starting out, I usually always recommend Mailerlite. They've had their bugs, but they are very user friendly. And in their free version for your 2 weeks, you can use everything that they have, throw it at them with the exception of their chat support. And you can really see what can happen. And their university that they have attached to it, that's not the right word, but their learning knowledge center is vast and all video based. So you can kind of go in and see all the steps. So I like them and they're affordable. I've used ConvertKit. They are expensive, but really great at very complex automations. I would stay away from those that are geared to medium and large enterprises, such as HubSpot, Constant Contact, a few other ones. There are really affordable options that look great on the onset, but when it comes to what they do, it's not really what authors would need. And those would be like Sendinblue, Twilio. They're called cloud communicators. So they're looking at subscriber lists that are 6-7 figures big, and you're looking for a text package and a voice package and some automation from e-commerce pieces, which we just don't have the need for. And then finally, the new player around is Flowdesk, which I get asked about a lot. Now, I love almost everything about Flowdesk, but the pieces that I don't love are holding me back from putting a lot of my eggs in that basket. But I will say that if you have a large list, and by large list, I would say anywhere from 10,000 and up, getting into Flowdesk is going to save you a whole lot of money. I mean, you can get, if you have, if you know somebody with an affiliate code, so that's anybody who has Flowdesk, can give you an affiliate code. You can get it for $19 a month for an unlimited emails and unlimited subscribers, and that will disappear after beta. So they're in beta, which means they're just trying everything out and seeing what works. After beta, there'll be a max of $38 a month. So that's still so much less than Mailchimp for that same level.
Yeah,
definitely.
that's awesome.
Wow.
So so that was a good roundup. Thank you of those ones. That's really helpful. So one of the things I was concerned about, and you talked about Mailerlite having a few hiccups with this, which I did sort of last year before, was deliverability. So can you talk about that, what that means and why that's important with Mail?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, that's the most important thing in an email service provider. Can they get the emails you send into an inbox and not in a junk folder or even a promotions tab? And their Mailerlite was rated number 2, I think, after ActiveCampaign. I can't remember. They jockey for space for the longest time as far as deliverability, and that would be one reason I love them. But they had hiccups last year as they were improving their interface and their back-end stuff, and then they had hiccups again last month. And before I go any further, I would say if you are building a list, back it up on the regular. Back up that list like once a month, export it. So you can, if you have a release, which is what happened to a lot of people, on a day when Mailerlite crashes or Mailchimp crashes, they've all crashed. It just seems that Mailerlite's been in the news about it more often than not lately. Yeah. But it's because they've been increasing their abilities behind the scenes, and they're growing so fast and sometimes too fast, right? But their deliverability is great. And there's one key that you can do with no matter what email service provider you're with. And that's not just verify your domain. And this would be one thing that Mailchimp doesn't do. And another reason they don't have the great deliverability rate that almost everybody else does is when you sign up with anybody other than Mailchimp, you need to have an email that is attached to a domain that you own. So for me, it's hollymortimer.com. My email is hello@hollymortimer.com. And Mailerlite goes through a process of verifying that I am the owner of that, right? And that helps improve deliverability. So even though it's a pain in the butt, it's helping you. It's helping your emails get to the right place, because let's say Google's algorithm only lets things go into inboxes that have been verified, which is a true statement. Then they have a second layer that a lot of people miss, and it's called authentication. And Mailerlite has it well laid out. Flowdesk, you have to kind of go dig for it, and others you have to dig for it, but it's there. And it is the process of taking your a string of code from your, let's say from Mailerlite, and you put it into your domain hosting piece. And then your deliverability rate jumps, because now you are, it's kind of like you've done a police check, you know, like you are who you say you are. If we put this in somebody's inbox, a spam report is probably rarely going to happen. And so doing those two things helps your deliverability rate. And then there's a whole list of other things: getting your stuff opened, getting your stuff clicked on, getting people to reply to you are the three big ones that you can do to increase your deliverability rate. Because we all have a score, an email marketing score out there as soon as we register with an email marketing service. And we want that score to be as high as possible. And you get more points when people open your stuff, you get more points when they click on things, and you get more points when they reply to you. Those are like bonus points.
Awesome.
And then you'll start to see, it's like a cyclical thing. As soon as that starts to increase, more people start to open, more people start to open, more people start to click, more people, you know, so then suddenly you're getting these great open rates, and you're selling more books.
Awesome. Okay. What are some of the open and click rates that we should be aiming for? You know, you kind of see stuff all around the internet about what's average, and what are your perspectives on that?
I mean, if you looked it up, you would find, like, in the author world, an average open rate of like 22%. But I mean, I've seen wild variances of that. The bigger your list, the harder it is to get that open rate higher, which is the opposite. People are always, especially in social media and in lists, it's the same. I want more people. But for me, I'm like, I'd rather have less people, a higher open rate, and everybody in that that got that email opened it and read it and wanted to buy it, as opposed to sending it to 20,000 people and getting a 20% open rate. I can get, I mean, I have some clients that get 75, 80% open rate on their smaller segments. And that's where we can really dive deep into segmenting that 20,000 list into people that are more likely to take actions that you want. But if you're getting something below 20%, you're going to need to look at why. And I think that's probably a good benchmark to start at.
Yeah. Okay. Could you just quickly give us some of the reasons why? Like, you've got people who are not interested, I would have thought, but
usually it's people that are not opening it or interested. It's all back to that welcome sequence. So if you're just onboarding, so like, let's say you do an anthology and it's a list builder, and that is the main thing. Everything in it is free, but you get this big giant, like 10,000 person big list that you get at the end of the promotional period, and you just start emailing them, and they're like, I don't know who this is. You know, I just read a book with 10 different authors in it, and I can only remember the first author, you know, or whatever, as opposed to getting that list and then putting them in a welcome sequence before you sell them anything else. And it's like, you read, you know, I was part of this anthology. Oh yeah, I do remember this author, or I haven't read that yet. And then you just slowly kind of ease them in, and you're still going to have people that you need to clear out. But that's why your open rates are down, because there's just too many people on there that are the wrong people on your list.
And you'd have a different kind of welcome sequence for someone that you got through some kind of promotion versus people who are coming organically from back of a book. Is that fair to say? Yeah.
I have one client that has not in our genre. She has written a memoir, and she's a professor, and she just needed a welcome sequence. She was meeting people on pre-COVID on a touring circuit that she was speaking on, and she has 10 welcome sequences that have small variations. And so it's people I meet face to face, people who come to me from from my website, people who I'm students who I'm educating, and so they all have somewhat similar bodies to them, but the language is a little bit different. And so some of them, she has one for people that have already bought my book and I'm talking to face to face. Like, she's very detailed and very not the norm, but she doesn't want to offer them her book in that sequence. She just wants to offer them her RSS feed for her blog. So the welcome sequence, you don't have to rewrite it every time, but you can. I love duplicating it and tweaking it for the audience coming in. I have one for front matter and one for back matter, and they're different. So I don't catch a ton of people at the front, but I do catch some people at the front. So they haven't read anything. And so what I'm talking to them about is completely different than, it's like, ooh, welcome. You clicked that link before you even read my book. Like, I think we're going to be best friends. And then, and that's the difference between the back matter. Did you not love Aiden? You're going to want to meet him because you're going to want to read more of him. He's in the next book. And so they're two different first emails.
Yeah.
Do
you put him, like, so when you talk about, reading the next book, do you put a link to the next book in the series via your, via say Amazon, or do you put a link to the newsletter, join my newsletter first, or how do you?
I put a link to the newsletter, and it's the welcome sequence. So I have a couple little like mini courses, and one of them is called From Reader to Revenue. And I love a funnel. Some people love funnels, some people don't. Funnel is just a path, and I have the system I call Hub and Spoke, and everybody's moving into the hub. And it's so much simpler for me than having people going in 10 different directions at once. And so my hub is my welcome sequence, and I move them always into there. But if they're coming from back matter, it's a short, tight move to the next book. If they're coming from my website, it's a long tail, or if they're coming from Pinterest or somewhere else, Instagram or something like that.
Yeah.
You were saying that when you put in your sign up in your newsletter, in your book, it can be in like 2 or 3 different places in that one book.
Yep.
So in your front matter, in your back matter, whereabouts would it go in your back matter?
Right away, right after the end.
After I finish that book?
Yeah.
And then maybe later and attached to your bio or something?
Yeah. It's the same as in a newsletter. You don't want to overload it with links and moving them off, but at the same time, I'm going to offer it more than once. And usually I front load it on the newsletter. And so the back matter, if you think of it in a section as like the back matter isn't just what's next. It's a marketing strategy, all of in and of itself, right? So, and I think like I would. So if I've read this book to the end, what are my habits? And I want to make sure I catch those that would click off right away or like close the book or whatever. And then I want to make sure, if I have a preview of the next book, I need to have that ask again, and but I don't want to have it too many times. So it's just this fine balance of what it is. But then often it's that single sentence that it's not just join my newsletter. It's were you satisfied with this ending? Or like there are some fun ways that you can use your brand voice to encourage them to get over to that welcome sequence.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's so interesting. So other thing I want to talk about is a landing page. Now, it used to be you had to have the landing page on your website, is how I think mine is still set up. But a lot of the platforms now have their own landing pages that you can set up. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. Depends on who you are and what you prefer. They're going to kind of do the same thing. If you use the service provider's landing page, it's a great service for those that are less web savvy or don't want to hire somebody to do all that connecting stuff for them. It's like, so if you use Mailerlite's landing page service, which I do frequently and do for a lot of clients, you can just build it and then you can just tell Mailerlite, anybody that fills that in, do that. Whereas if you build it on your website, there are pros and cons to that as well. You can build kind of the same thing, but it's time consuming. It's not templated and laid out for you and all that. And then you have to make sure that link is always working. and then you have to typically send them to a landing page. So to get Mailerlite's like form or whatever that is that you want to put in there. So some people, it's just easier to start and stop at the landing page that's integrated with your email service provider. I like the website only because I'm also a data hoarder, so I'm like, who's on this website? How can I remarket?
Yeah, I was going to say you get
advertising to them,
Yeah.
but you do. It is much easier than it used to be. Like they have all those templates there for you just to kind of drop and go on.
And you can put a form, well, at least I can put a form on my website from so it does go straight to the email provider, even if it is on your website.
Yep.
Yeah. Is there anything in particular that you think there should be on the landing page, like any kind of encouragement? Do you sell other products there, or you just, how do you run that?
Yeah, so I'm not a fan of selling anybody else's stuff on my stuff. And that includes, like, I occasionally will mention other people's stuff in my newsletters, but I have a pretty hard and fast rule that I have to have read it, loved it, and know the author before I'll talk about them. But aside from that, so my landing pages, I try to make them a little, a very, very much brand specific and in my voice. And some have covers, and like I just built one I'm testing a cover right now. And so I built 3 landing pages, all the same, different covers, seeing which one converted, who, and I'm like next level, when it comes to that. So, well, what copy? And it's not just join my newsletter, and it's why does somebody want to be there? And what are they going to get when they do join? And so I really want to have a piece of my voice there. Some of my landing pages have GIFs or GIFs or whatever you want to call them on them, and no hint of the cover whatsoever. It's my double opt-in sequence is an example of that, where it is kind of a landing page. So you find me, and in Canada, the law is you must have a double opt-in sequence when you're asking somebody to join your list in order to remarket to them. And it is the same in many, many places of the world. But I don't want to have the boring double opt-in ask, and that's where people start to get stuck, inside of there, and they never confirm, and then you haven't got that, you've spent that time and you can't market to that person. So my double opt-in is, and I always forget his name, the guy from Frozen 1 who owns that shack in the mountain.
I don't know his name.
Yeah, the guy with the family in the sauna.
He always goes, yoo-hoo.
Yeah.
So that's my Jeff is like, yoo-hoo, hi.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And like, you made it. You jumped through my Canadian hoops. I love maple syrup and double opt-ins. I'm Canadian. And sometimes I love Justin Bieber, but just not right now. And so that's my double opt-in. And then it says, you're about to get another email from this Canadian person, but if you jump through these hoops, I promise you a free book on the other end,
nice.
And then the reminder email isn't just say, click here to subscribe. It's like, remember your promise. My promise to you was a free book. You promised me you'd click. And so then that just moves them. And then on the other end, the unsubscribe is one of my favorite characters, Leslie Knope from Parks and Rec. And she's saying, I once had a boyfriend who broke up with me through his mom. And that is this meme that I have in there. And I'm like, are you breaking up with me? And are you somebody's mom? And then I'm like, if it's true, click yes. If it's not, click no, and anyway, and half the people may not, but I know my market. I know I write for 40-plus-year-old women. I'm assuming a good amount of them know who Leslie Knope is. And if they don't, maybe they'll be intrigued to see who this person is. But these landing pages, and there's so many people competing for the same readers that everybody else is competing. And if they land there, I really need to, it's in marketing terms, it's called a blue ocean. I really need to be something different than what they're seeing in order to entice them. But then I need to follow it up with what I said I was going to. So that's the job of the welcome sequence.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's down to figuring out who you are and your author kind of persona and knowing your brand.
You don't want
Every
it to be
entrepreneur-
different.
Yeah, every
You-
entrepreneur is guilty
yeah.
of it. I want to sell all things to all people.
Yeah.
But when you niche down and really know who you're talking to, like I know I have
Yes.
parents. I write books about parents, and I know that they'll all know who that guy is from Frozen going, yoo-hoo, you know,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and I know, and so when you narrow down and you focus on those people only, sure, you're going to get lots of other people, but you're going to do a way better job at marketing to them because you know exactly what they respond to.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's
So,
amazing.
and that kind of leads on a little bit. So this is going to be my last question because we have been talking for a while.
I know, sorry.
That's no, it's been gold,
Great.
gold, I say.
Gold.
But you kind of talked a little bit about it already, but in some terms, but you mentioned in the very beginning that people are afraid of content and they say, I'm so boring. What do I write about? So how do you answer that? What kind of content should we be trying to do? Just either in the automation sequences or in the normal emails?
All times you should always be thinking about telling, not selling. So it's the 80-20 rule works just as well for newsletters as it does for social media. It's 80% of the time you should be storytelling and 20% of the time you should be selling. And that you could take that in one email. 20% of it should be moving them to a sale, but the bulk of it should be interesting. And people I use this analogy often, like if somebody walked up to you that you had been admired from afar forever and ever, and they said, do you want to go on a date? And you said yes, and then when it was time to date, you didn't answer the door. It's kind of like a newsletter. Somebody has said to you, I want to get to know you better, I want to date you, and you've said, I'm too scared, you know, I don't know if you'll like me, I'm boring or whatever. But I get the best response on my newsletters, and I theme my newsletters, and I went through a period, and I'm completely transparent. I went through a period of time last year when I got a divorce, and I went through burnout, and I didn't release a book. I haven't released a book for 12 months, and I have written 4 newsletters a month in that entire 12 months, and my average revenue is the same as it was when I was released. Because I'm doing 2 things. One, I'm always building my list. I'm not advertising to sell books, I'm advertising to get people on my list. And the second thing is they know so much about me, and that's not for everybody. There are super secret pen names, and I get that, but there's no reason that you can't write your newsletter in the voice of those super secret pen names and give them a piece of you. You know, I have a few clients that are so good at doing that, where they are super, super secret, but their pen names have their own persona, and they share so much about that my whole point is that getting personal is the key to selling. And it like I have a series called Holly versus the House, and as a single mom, I didn't know the first thing about fixing my house, and my first project was my toilet seat fell apart in the middle of the night, and then I had to go buy a toilet seat, and then I had to put it on, and that was a newsletter, you know. And I'm like, and they're like, oh my god, I was, you know. And but again, it's back to, I know the books I'm about to write are all about divorcees and and second chance kind of romances, and that's who I've been actively putting on my list. But by giving them a piece of me when I am ready to release, which I do have now, things about to come out, they're opening, they're clicking, they know my story, they know that my story is going to match what they're going to get in the book.
That's an important piece of that, I think, because your books are you know, in this similar style to what you're talking about. So for me, say, let's just go there. So I'm urban fantasy, and I'm writing younger protagonists, like sort of 19, 20, 23-year-olds. Me talking about fixing the toilet seat, probably not the right angle. So what would you suggest for that? So how do you just have to know your readership and know...
You know your readership. So I have one client who writes similar, so YA, RH Academy. and she is a mother, has a new baby, and I highly recommend you follow her. Her name is Mia Harlan, and she has the greatest newsletters that come out every Friday night, which is a strategy. And she knows her YA readers are Friday night readers, and it's the strangest time to send an email, but it works, for her people. She uses emojis, and she writes all of her newsletters as her, the author, which is a super secret pen name, but in the same voice as the world that she's built, right? So she is this lead character, Amber, and she writes inside of this RH Academy world. So there's authors coming in and out of the world, and she is one of those authors. And all of her newsletters have been building to this point where they all know she was having a baby, and it's Minnie Mortal. The baby's name was Minnie Mortal, and her husband might be a vampire or he might not be. So she's telling them she's married, but is he a vampire? And that's a whole theme in her newsletters, like, because she has another person in that world that's like, I saw Mia's husband out at midnight. I think he is a vampire, and or why would he? Oh, she had a baby at 11:53. Totally, the baby is now a vampire, and it's all in emoji speak. It's all in language that appeals to a YA audience, but it's still little pieces of her, but it isn't. They don't know her real name, and they don't know her husband's real name. They don't know her job. She's a librarian. I know her very well, and they used to never even see pictures of her, just little blobs on her face, and she was terrified, and now she is like this email writing pro, and her writing friend Eva, who writes in the same world, is really great at that too. She writes space alien romances and RH Academy, and there's no holds barred in those emails. But I know Eva, those aren't her. But those are who her audience thinks she is, and they're kind of written in the world. They're 100% text-based, because those YA readers are not interested in the pictures. They'll follow a link, but they don't care about much, other than, she uses emojis all the time. She uses funny words. She uses trendy words. She uses text. She doesn't even have a header, and she sends it regularly on Friday nights. Her subject line is always an emoji series, which her people voted on. So she's like, if I was an emoji, what would it be? And so they voted over a month long. And now she has like 2 dancing girls with dark hair. And then she has the middle one, which she changes with the season. So it's turkey, or it's a Christmas tree, or it's whatever. And then it's a vampire, because she's married to a vampire, according to her followers. And so it's like,
that's very cool.
And every time her email comes, it has the same emoji, 4 emojis at the head of it. And so when I'm looking at my inbox, I see, Mia wrote another email, and she knows that's the communication method preferred by her 16, 17-year-old readers. And so she takes a piece of her that isn't all authentically a piece of her, and molds it into what she knows they want to read. And it's a story the whole way.
It's really clever.
And it weaves in and out of her world that she builds as well.
That's really good. So it's about taking what your books are about and who the audience of those books are,
Why
and then turning that into
Why do they read your book? What do they like about it? We'll make newsletters sound the same.
And that's cool, because that's I think that's why we say, I have nothing to write about, because it's like that whole kind of my life is not the same as my books kind of thing. And you've got to figure out a way to meld them together.
I keep a digital log of ideas, same way I would a book. Like, oh my God, that would make a funny newsletter, or when I'm really, really stuck, I will write a newsletter from the in the point of view of my most favorite hero, not heroine, heroes. They're always there for the hero in my books. And although hopefully I'm writing women's fiction now, we can turn that around. But like it was Brendan Murphy does quarantine ... and it was his point of view, and he's like, this sucks, super sucks, and I can't get away from my kids, and all these things. And so that was a newsletter.
That's
like,
awesome.
and they loved it. And they're like, oh, and those that hadn't read him are like, well, I want to read more about this guy, and then they'll click through. So there's always something you can do. I don't love anything less than 2 emails a month, and in a release month, different segments, I'll end up sending 15 emails. And I have my unsubscribe rate over 3 years with Mailerlite. I've only had 114 unsubscribes. And the welcome sequence does that. That's what the welcome sequence job is.
Wow, that is really cool.
That is amazing.
I do have one burning question that I would like to ask.
Yes.
Okay.
Is there, and I'm sure our listeners would like to know, is there a right length for a newsletter?
A right link?
No,
Length.
length.
Oh, length.
How long?
Sorry.
Sorry.
Also, the link is a good question too.
Well, I mean, you can. Oh, let's talk about links, because I love links. Length, yes. I mean, text heavy. So the internet's request is that you have 80% text to 20% image and links combined, which is a hard ask for a lot of people. But I think it's because they're mostly afraid of writing a lot of text in a newsletter because they think they're boring. We're back to that first part. So think about your own reading habits as far as newsletters go. How often do you get to the bottom? Not very often, right? And why? I always think, oh, why did I open that subject line? Why did I scroll through that email to the bottom? What was it about it that I liked? What was it about this email that I hated? Why did I click off on it right away? I click off on emails that ask me to buy something at the top of the thing. So no, there's no prescribed length. I don't think serials translate well in emails. So like putting a whole scene in there. I like to have a teaser and then link onto your website so you can get that data too. So you've got people clicking and moving, and you have that pixel there to capture their information. But as long as you keep it, if you think, oh, if I was reading this, would I still be reading this? And if your answer is no, then it's probably the same for your reader. And big pictures doesn't mean big sales. Big pictures means the internet is probably sending that to the promotions tab.
Right.
So headers, neat. Okay, no headers. What about links? What were you going to say about links?
So links and images are
Sounded
treated the same. Oh, you can. So one fun thing is in Mailerlite, let's say you're making one of those landing pages, you can attach your domain, or you can create a link instead of just taking the one that they give you. So I can't remember, it's like subscribe. I can't remember what it says, but there's a standard templated link that comes. Take your time to edit that and make it your own link. Like, I love Aiden Murphy. It's one of my characters.com, or whatever. And so that's what people see. And you put a little logo there and it looks just like a real website, or you can link it to your own domain so that you can capture data on that landing page that Mailerlite has built for you. And that when people open it, it's secure instead of not secure, which the internet doesn't love either. So don't just take those standardized links that they give you and run with it, because I'm all about the brand. Is it consistent? Do I have something that's interesting even in a link? Like when I'm looking at a link from a website, I'm like, oh yeah, that's hard to remember, or oh, that's easy to remember, something like that. Yeah. And then links inside your newsletter, they're measured just as images are, and they're actually bundled with an image. So that 80-20 rule, I think the most you can stretch it is 60-40, 60% text, 40% images. So try not to have a link every other, all the time. I have a couple clients that love doing that. And that's why I love like universal links. So, and there's debate about those, whether they work or not. I'll have people stored and segmented Apple lovers, Kobo lovers, based on the welcome sequence. So it's like, oh, they click the Kobo link, they love Kobo. So I'll only have the Kobo link in the same newsletter that they get, in the newsletter they get. And the same newsletter might go out to somebody else that only gets an Apple link. So I'm trying not to have that Amazon Canada, Amazon US, Amazon UK, Amazon Australia, like all those links are adding up to undeliverable emails. And if you use a universal link, or if you segment based on, if you're in Kindle Unlimited, super easy. You just have the Amazon link and away you go. But when you're wide, it gets more complicated. But what you don't want is links everywhere.
Okay.
So you're saying that if you have a link that you want them to go to promote your book, you wouldn't necessarily put it in the image as well, because you can attach it.
You can,
yeah,
and I would decide to do that if on the stats that and so this is one reason I do love Mailerlite. Another one is you can look, and when you're in the paid version, you can say view email, and it shows you where people are clicking on the email. And if the majority of your people are clicking images, then you're going to put links. It's worth it to take a chance and put the links behind those images. But I have not many people clicking on the links of my images, but I have a couple clients where they're image focused, and I have to have links buried behind every image. And so if I do that, then I'm just going to type a few more sentences, put a heading in, put some, just to make sure that I'm upping the text count and making it balanced as far as the ratio is concerned.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good advice.
Awesome. Okay, I think we're coming up on the hour, so maybe even past it.
I could keep going because I love Mailerlite.
Do you have, just any final pieces of advice to just round out the interview? Anything that the most important thing for people to take away?
Yeah, most important thing is to make list building a part of your strategy, just like people make Facebook a non-negotiable part of your strategy. So thinking of it as your hub, sending people to your list. Like, you don't build a business on land you don't own, and you do not own Facebook, and the rules change there every week, and goodness gracious, it's a lot to kind of always be chasing your tail. So make list building the most important part of your strategy, and build a welcome sequence. Even if you never send a newsletter out, you've got a welcome sequence running to kind of sell to them and get them interested. And then when you're ready, I've had people that I've had a welcome sequence running and I haven't sent a newsletter in 2 years. I'm like, great, let's go. So like they're there and they've heard of you at one point and they've given you permission to email them. We can email them and tell them. They're like, oh, have you ever been ghosted? Like, I just ghosted you, and you just make fun of it. But build your list, automate a sequence, write more books. So that's
awesome.
All equally
perfect.
Thank you so much. That was a awesome episode. I've taken so many notes. It's been fantastic. So if someone wants to find you, Holly, where is the best place to find you?
Yeah, they just can go to thesocialvert.com. When I first started, I bought that domain. It's like, I'm not introverted and extroverted, I'm socialverted. And I love to socialize and talk and do all those things. And social media was a big part of my platform, and now it's email marketing. So it's a funny word that people are like, what? I don't get it. But socialvert.com, you'll be able to find me. You can search for me too, Holly Mortimer. But I love to talk all things emails. I have a Facebook group where it's a membership space. 3 times a month, I'm in there live talking about email marketing or other marketing. It's the same as the Socialvert inside of Facebook. So you can remember that one word, you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that.
Awesome.
And where can we be found? Cheryl?
SpaGirlsPodcast.com. Was not expecting that. Pretty much everywhere, Spa Girls Podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Holly, and thank you everyone listening today. We will be back again next week. But for now, farewell and have a good day.
Keep well. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for inviting me. See you later.
Bye.